What happens when a woman broken by betrayal accepts a marriage colder than death itself? Lydia Harrow lost everything in one night. Her reputation shattered, her family ruined, her future destroyed. But when the most feared man in the kingdom offers her a deal wrapped in ice and iron, she makes a choice that will either save her or bury her forever. Stay until the end to see how a contract written in desperation becomes a love story that reshapes an empire. Drop a like if you're ready for a tale of betrayal, power, and redemption. Comment which city you're watching from. The chandelier crystals caught the light like shattered glass, and Lydia Harrow stood beneath them, wishing they would fall and end this. Her corset dug into ribs that hadn't seen a full meal in weeks. The ballroom swirled with silk and champagne, with laughter that sounded like knives being sharpened. 6 months ago, she'd belonged here. 6 months ago, she'd worn hope like a second skin. Now she wore borrowed gloves to hide the calluses. "Is that her?" someone whispered behind a fan. "The Harrow girl?" Lydia's spine went straighter. She'd learned that much, at least, how to stand like she wasn't dying inside. "I heard her father gambled away everything. The house, the lands, even the silver. And the fiancé, Lord Pemberton, he exposed it all at their own engagement ball. Can you imagine?" Lydia could. She'd lived it. She still woke up some nights tasting the champagne she'd been holding when Edmund announced to 300 guests that he couldn't possibly marry into such disgrace, that her family's debts were an anchor he refused to drown beneath. He'd said it with a smile. That was the part that still burned. "Why is she even here?" another voice hissed. Good question. Lydia had asked herself the same thing when Lady Ashford's invitation arrived. "Old family friend," the note had said, but friendship didn't explain why she'd been seated at the furthest table, half hidden behind a pillar, close enough to watch, but far enough to be forgotten. "Lydia." She turned. Lady Ashford approached with the kind of smile that preceded bad news. "You came." The older woman's eyes flickered over Lydia's dress, last season's, carefully mended where the moths had gotten to it. "How brave." Brave. As if attending a ball was the same as charging into battle. "Thank you for the invitation," Lydia said, because what else could she say? "Thank you for dangling me like bait in front of everyone who destroyed me?" "Of course, dear, though I must say I'm surprised your father allowed it. How is Lord Harrow?" "Resting." The lie came smooth as silk. Her father wasn't resting. He was rotting in a bedroom that smelled like sickness and failure, staring at walls he could no longer afford. The stroke had taken his words, but left his eyes sharp enough to see what his choices had cost them. "Such a shame," Lady Ashford murmured. "And your mother?" "Dead, as you know." Lydia kept her voice flat. 10 years now." "Yes. Well." Lady Ashford's discomfort lasted exactly 3 seconds before her gaze sharpened on something over Lydia's shoulder. "Oh, you simply must excuse me. The Duke of Thornvale just arrived, and Adrian Thornvale is here?" The question escaped before Lydia could stop it. Lady Ashford's eyebrows climbed. "You know of him." Everyone knew of him. Adrian Thornvale, the Iron Duke, the man who'd inherited a failing duchy at 19 and turned it into an empire by 30. He owned half the coal mines in the north, controlled shipping routes that made kings nervous, and had a reputation for crushing anyone who crossed him with the efficiency of a butcher. He also never attended social events. "I've heard stories," Lydia said carefully. "Haven't we all?" Lady Ashford leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They say he hasn't smiled since his parents died, that he keeps his estate like a military garrison, that he once ruined a lord over a broken contract and didn't blink when the man's family begged for mercy." "Sounds delightful." "Doesn't he?" Lady Ashford completely missed the sarcasm. "Terrifying, of course, but powerful. And unmarried." Her gaze slid back to Lydia with something calculating. "Do try to enjoy yourself, dear." She swept away, leaving Lydia standing there with a sick feeling crawling up her throat. The crowd shifted, parting like water around stone, and Lydia saw him. Adrian Thornvale didn't walk into a room. He claimed it. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that made everyone else look overdone. His face could have been carved from granite, all sharp angles and cold eyes that swept the ballroom like he was cataloging weaknesses. He looked exactly like a man who'd never been soft a day in his life. Their eyes met across 50 feet of polished marble. Lydia's heart kicked against her ribs. She didn't know why, just that something in his gaze felt like recognition, though they'd never spoken. Like he knew exactly who she was, and had decided something about her already. Then he looked away, and she could breathe again. Lydia Harrow. The voice behind her was silk over poison. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Edmund Pemberton had that effect, made the air go rancid. Lord Pemberton. She turned slowly, arranging her face into something blank. What an unexpected pleasure. Is it? He smiled, the same smile he'd worn when he loved her, when he ruined her, when he walked away. You look well. She looked like she'd been starving, and they both knew it. You're too kind. I heard about your father. Tragic business, that stroke. Edmund sipped his champagne, watching her over the rim. Though perhaps a mercy. At least he doesn't have to face what's coming. What's coming? The creditors, darling. Surely you know they're circling. Your house is on the auction block. Next month, I believe. The world tilted. She'd known it was bad. But next month? You seem well informed about my family's affairs. Oh, I keep apprised. Edmund's smile sharpened. After all, I nearly married into that disaster. Can you imagine? I'd have been dragged down with you. Something hot and bitter rose in Lydia's chest. How fortunate for you that you have such keen survival instincts. I call it self-preservation. He stepped closer, and she smelled the wine on his breath. You should try it, although I suppose your options are rather limited now. Meaning? Meaning no man with sense would take on your debts. Your damaged goods, Lydia. Spoiled stock. His eyes traveled over her with casual cruelty. Pretty enough, I'll grant you. But prettiness doesn't pay creditors. 6 months ago, this would have broken her. 6 months ago, she might have run. But 6 months of watching her father waste away, of counting pennies, of lying awake planning which possessions to sell next, it had burned something out of her. Or maybe burned something in. Are you finished? She asked quietly. Edmund blinked. Excuse me? Your little speech, the knife twisting. Are you finished, or should I stand here while you work through more of your thoughts on my worthlessness? His face darkened. I'm being honest. You're being cruel. There's a difference. Lydia met his eyes, and for the first time in 6 months, she didn't look away first. You humiliated me because it was easier than admitting you were a coward. You dressed it up as principle, but we both know the truth. You were scared. Scared of debt, scared of difficulty, scared of anything that might require you to be more than a pretty title and a fat inheritance. How dare you? I dare because I have nothing left to lose. Her voice was steady now, cold even. You already took everything, so go ahead, Edmund. Say whatever makes you feel powerful. But know this, I survived you, and I'll survive what comes next. His hand shot out, fingers closing around her wrist. You think you can speak to me like, remove your hand. The voice cut through the space between them like a blade through silk. Edmund's grip loosened instantly. Adrian Thornvale stood 3 feet away. Up close, he was worse, or better, depending on your definition. Taller than Edmund by half a head, with shoulders that looked like they'd been built for armor. His eyes were gray, the color of winter storms, and they were fixed on Edmund with the focused intensity of a predator choosing whether to strike. Lord Pemberton. It wasn't a greeting. It was a statement, flat and empty of anything resembling warmth. Edmund released Lydia's wrist like it burned. Your Grace, I didn't... We were just... Miss Harrow and I have business to discuss. Adrian's gaze flickered to Lydia for half a second. If you'll excuse us. It wasn't a question. Edmund's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Of course, Your Grace, I was just leaving. He fled into the crowd like a rat into shadows. Lydia stood there, pulse hammering, trying to understand what just happened. Adrian Thornvale was looking at her now, really looking like she was a contract he was considering signing. Miss Harrow, Your Grace. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Thank you for the intervention, though it wasn't necessary. Wasn't it? I was handling it. Something flickered in his expression, amusement, maybe, or interest. You were, admirably. He paused. Walk with me. I don't. That wasn't a request. Lydia's temper flared. I'm not one of your servants. No. He stepped closer, and she realized how much space he took up, how his presence seemed to push all the air out of the room. You're the woman I came here to meet. Her heart stopped. What? Walk with me, Miss Harrow. Unless you'd prefer to have this conversation in front of Lady Ashford and her flock of vultures. He was already moving toward the terrace doors. Lydia's feet moved before her brain caught up. The night air hit her face like cold water. The terrace was empty, too early in the evening for drunk couples, too cold for anyone without a reason to be there. Adrian stopped at the balustrade, looking out over the gardens. Lydia stood beside him, acutely aware that they were alone, that she knew nothing about this man except his reputation for ruthlessness. You're wondering why I'm here, he said. The thought crossed my mind. I came for you. The words landed like stones in still water. Lydia's laugh was sharp, disbelieving. You don't know me. I know enough. He turned, and in the moonlight his face was all plains and shadows. I know your father gambled away your fortune and your future. I know Lord Pemberton destroyed what was left of your reputation. I know you're drowning, Miss Harrow. The question is whether you're smart enough to grab the rope when it's thrown. What rope? Marriage. The world tilted again. I beg your pardon? I'm proposing a contract. His voice was businesslike, empty of romance or pretense. You marry me. In exchange, I pay your father's debts, restore your family's standing, and provide you with everything you need to live comfortably. Lydia stared at him. Why? Because I need a wife. You could have any woman. I don't want any woman. His eyes held hers. I want someone who understands that this is a transaction, who won't expect love or affection or any of the nonsense most marriages pretend to be built on. You need money and protection. I need... He paused, something shifting in his expression. Someone capable of managing my household and representing my interests. Someone who won't crumble the first time society shows its teeth. You think I won't crumble? You just stared down the man who destroyed you and didn't blink. Most women would have run or wept. You stood your ground. He tilted his head slightly. That's what I need. Lydia's mind raced. This was insane. Marrying a stranger, a man with a reputation for coldness and cruelty, a duke who looked at her like she was a piece on a game board. But what other options did she have? No love, she said slowly. No expectations. None. And if I refuse, then you refuse. I'll find someone else. His voice didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. But we both know what happens to you if you walk away. Your father's house goes to auction. His creditors will take everything, including the clothes on your back. You'll have nothing, Miss Harrow. Not even your name will protect you. She hated him for saying it, hated him more because it was true. How long do I have to decide? Until midnight. That's 3 hours. That's generous. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs with precise, controlled movements. 3 hours to choose between ruin and survival. I suggest you think carefully. He walked toward the terrace doors, then paused. One more thing, Miss Harrow. Peace. He looked back at her, and something in his expression was almost gentle. Almost. I don't make this offer out of pity. I make it because I believe you're stronger than you think you are. Prove me right. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the stars and a choice that felt like stepping off a cliff. Lydia didn't go back inside. She stood on that terrace until her hands went numb, until the music from the ballroom felt like something happening in another world. Her mind spun through possibilities, calculations, desperations. Marriage to Adrian Thornvale, the Iron Duke. A man who'd just offered her salvation wrapped in chains. No love, no illusions, just survival. She thought about her father, wasting in that bedroom, about the creditors who'd started coming to the door, their smiles friendly but their eyes hungry, about Edmund's words, damaged goods, spoiled stock, and the way he'd looked at her like she was something to be pitied. She thought about what came next if she refused. The auction. Losing the house that held every memory of her mother. watching her father die in some rented room that smelled like other people's sickness. She thought about the alternative: marrying a stranger, living in his fortress of an estate, becoming the wife of a man who looked at her like a contract to be executed. Neither choice was good, but one choice let her keep fighting. Lydia walked back inside. The ballroom hadn't changed. Same faces, same laughter, same casual cruelties wrapped in silk. But something had shifted inside her, gone hard and sharp as a blade. She found him by the fireplace, standing alone despite the crowd. People gave Adrian Thornvale space the way they gave space to fire or falling rocks, out of instinct for self-preservation. He saw her coming. Something flickered across his face, approval, maybe, or satisfaction. "Your Grace," she said, pitching her voice low enough that only he could hear. "I accept." "Just like that?" "You gave me 3 hours. I'm saving us both the time." His mouth almost smiled. Almost. "Practical." "Desperate," she corrected. "Let's not pretend this is anything but what it is." "I never pretend, Miss Harrow." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "The contract, basic terms, marriage, financial support for you and your father, a household allowance, separate bedrooms unless you request otherwise." He paused. "Which I don't expect you will." Lydia took the paper. Her hands didn't shake. That was something. "I'll have my solicitor review." "You don't have a solicitor, and even if you did, you don't have time." His voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "Sign it or don't, but make the choice now." She looked up at him, this stranger who'd just bought her future. "Why separate bedrooms?" "Because I don't expect you to warm my bed out of obligation." He met her eyes steadily. "If that changes, you'll tell me, but I won't demand it as part of the arrangement." Something loosened in her chest. Not relief exactly, but something close. She signed the paper without reading it. Adrian took it back, folded it once, and tucked it away. "We'll marry in 1 week. I'll send a carriage for you and your father. Pack whatever you want to keep. The rest will be sold to satisfy the creditors." 1 week? Is there a reason to wait? Yes, her heart screamed, because this is insane. Because you're a stranger. Because I'm signing away what's left of my life. "No," she said out loud. "No reason." "Good." He nodded once, sharp and final. Then it settled. He started to turn, then paused. "One more thing." "Yes?" "You'll face cruelty in the coming days, from society, from people you thought were friends. They'll call you desperate, mercenary, worse." His gray eyes held hers. "Bear it. Because on the other side is a life where they can't touch you." "Because I'll be your wife." "Because you'll be a duchess," he corrected quietly. "And duchesses don't answer to anyone." Then he walked away, leaving her standing in the ballroom with a future she'd just bought in blood and signatures. Lydia looked around at the glittering crowd, at Lady Ashford pretending not to watch, at Edmund Pemberton, pale and furious by the card table, at all the faces that had watched her fall and done nothing. She smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. The week before the wedding was exactly as Adrian had predicted. Brutal. The gossip started before Lydia even made it home from the ball. By morning, the scandal sheets were running headlines. Desperate Harrow girl snares the Iron Duke. Fortune hunter strikes gold. From ruin to riches, one woman's shameless climb. Old friends crossed the street to avoid her. Invitations dried up. The few people who did speak to her made their disgust clear. "You could have found honest work," Mrs. Whitmore said, her mouth pinched like she'd bitten a lemon. "My cousin's estate needed a governess." Lydia had smiled sweetly. "How kind, but I'm afraid I'm rather busy preparing for my wedding." "To a man you don't love." "To a man who won't let my father die in poverty." Strange how love matters less when you're starving. Mrs. Whitmore had left in a huff. The creditors came next, suddenly polite now that the Duke of Thornvale's name was attached to the Harrow debts. They bowed and scraped and promised there was no rush. "Take all the time you need, Your Grace." Her father said nothing. Couldn't say anything, locked behind eyes that saw everything and a mouth that no longer worked. But when Lydia told him about the marriage, about Adrian Thornvale's offer, she saw something shift in his expression. Relief. or maybe shame that it had come to this. She chose to believe relief. The morning of the wedding, Lydia woke in her childhood bedroom for the last time. The room was nearly empty now, furniture sold, paintings taken down, everything valuable already auctioned to cover what debts they could. She dressed herself. No lady's maid, no mother to help with the buttons. Just her and a wedding dress that had been her grandmother's, carefully preserved in a trunk that the creditors hadn't found. White silk, yellowed slightly with age. Lace that smelled like lavender and dust. It fit her too well, or she'd become too thin for it. Either way, she looked like a ghost of brides past. The carriage Adrian sent was black and severe, crest emblazoned on the door in silver. 2 footmen helped her father inside, carefully, respectfully. He looked small in his wheelchair, shrunken by illness and failure. Lydia squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, weak but there. The church was small, private. No guests, no flowers, no music. Just a priest who looked nervous, 2 witnesses Adrian had provided, and the man himself. Adrian Thornvale stood at the altar in black, severe as his carriage, his face giving away nothing. Lydia walked down the aisle alone. Their eyes met halfway, and she saw something flicker there. Assessment, maybe, or approval that she'd shown up, as if he'd expected her to run. The ceremony was short. Words she barely heard, responses she gave on instinct. The ring he slid onto her finger was heavy, white gold and sapphires that looked like ice. "You may kiss the bride." Adrian's hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing her cheek, and Lydia's breath caught. The kiss was brief, controlled, his mouth warm against hers for exactly 3 seconds before he pulled back. Professional, like sealing a contract. "Duchess," he murmured, so quiet only she could hear. And just like that, Lydia Harrow died. The woman who stood in her place was someone new, someone harder, someone who'd just bought her survival with vows that meant nothing and everything. Lydia Thornvale, the Iron Duke's wife. The carriage to Thornvale Estate was silent. Adrian sat across from her, reading papers like this was just another day. Her father dozed, exhausted from the ceremony. Lydia watched the countryside roll past and tried to feel something other than numb. The estate appeared through morning mist like something from a nightmare. Black stone, towers that looked like teeth, grounds that stretched as far as she could see. No warmth, no welcome. Just power, built in stone and iron. "Home," Adrian said, not looking up from his papers. Home. Lydia had sold herself to a fortress. The staff was assembled in the entrance hall, 50 people at least, all in black and gray, all standing rigid as soldiers. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Blackwood, was a severe woman with iron gray hair and eyes that measured Lydia and found her wanting. "Your Grace," the title sounded wrong in her mouth, like she was addressing someone else. "Welcome to Thornvale." "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood." Lydia kept her voice steady. "Please show me to my rooms. I'd like to see my father settled first." Something shifted in Mrs. Blackwood's expression. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "Of course, this way." The estate was a maze, hallways that went on forever, rooms that echoed, everything dark wood and cold stone. Her father's suite was on the ground floor, Adrian's instruction, so he wouldn't have to manage stairs. It was nicer than anything they'd had in years. Warm, comfortable, with a view of gardens that actually lived up to the name. Her father's eyes filled with tears when he saw it. "It's all right," Lydia whispered, kneeling beside his chair. "We're safe now. You're safe." He touched her face with trembling fingers, and she knew what he was saying even without words. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't," she said quietly. "Just rest." Mrs. Blackwood led her to the Duchess's chambers next, a suite almost as big as their entire old house. Bedroom, sitting room, dressing room, private bath, everything in shades of blue and silver, elegant but cold. "His Grace's rooms are through there," Mrs. Blackwood gestured to a connecting door. "Though he keeps it locked unless—" "I understand," Lydia cut her off. "We have an arrangement." Mrs. Blackwood's mouth thinned. "As you say, Your Grace." She left Lydia alone in rooms that felt like a very beautiful cage. That first night, Lydia lay in a bed too big for one person and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the estate, her husband was doing what? Working? Sleeping? Did men like Adrian Thornvale sleep, or did they just shut down like machines until morning? She didn't love him, didn't know him, didn't even particularly like him. But he'd saved her father, given them both a future when there should have been nothing but ruin. The price was everything she'd hoped for, everything she dreamed of when she was young and stupid and believed in love. But dreams didn't pay creditors. Dreams didn't keep her father alive. And somewhere in this cold estate, in this marriage built on necessity and signatures, Lydia Thornvale made a promise to herself. She would survive this. She would learn this new world, master it, make it hers. And one day, everyone who'd watched her fall, everyone who'd laughed and called her damaged goods, would look at her and know exactly what they'd thrown away. The Iron Duke had bought himself a wife, but Lydia was going to become a queen. The first breakfast at Thornvale Estate was a lesson in silence. Lydia sat at one end of a table built for 20, Adrian at the other, with enough polished mahogany between them to land a small aircraft. The dining room was all dark paneling and oil paintings of severe-looking ancestors who seemed to judge her for existing. A footman placed eggs and toast in front of her with the precision of a military operation. Another poured tea. A third adjusted the curtains to let in exactly the right amount of morning light. Adrian read his newspaper like she wasn't there. Lydia cut her eggs into small pieces and tried to remember how to breathe in a corset that felt tighter than yesterday. The silence pressed against her ears until she wanted to scream just to break it. "Your father slept well," Adrian said without looking up. "The physician checked on him this morning. He's recommending a new treatment." Thank you," Lydia's voice sounded too loud in the quiet, "for arranging the physician. It's what we agreed to." He turned a page. "Mrs. Blackwood will show you the household accounts after breakfast. You'll need to familiarize yourself with the staff schedules and supply orders." "Of course." More silence. More chewing. More of that awful feeling like she was disappearing into the furniture. "The village elders are requesting an audience," Adrian continued, still hidden behind newsprint. "They want to meet the new Duchess. I've scheduled it for tomorrow afternoon." Lydia's stomach clenched. "So soon? Would you prefer to hide?" "I'd prefer time to prepare." "You don't get time." Now he lowered the paper, those gray eyes pinning her in place. "You're the Duchess of Thornvale. They expect to see you, so you'll be seen." "What if I fail? Embarrass yourself? Give them reason to whisper?" Something almost like amusement crossed his face. "Then you'll learn from it. I don't expect perfection, Lydia. I expect effort." It was the first time he'd used her name since the wedding. It landed between them like a stone in still water. "Don't call me that," she said quietly. His eyebrow lifted. "It's your name. In this house, I'm the Duchess. Nothing else." She met his eyes steadily. "We have an arrangement, remember? Keep it professional." For a long moment he just looked at her. Then he nodded once and went back to his newspaper. "As you wish, Your Grace." The title sounded like mockery in his mouth, or maybe that was just her imagination, painting cruelty where there was only indifference. Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, severe as always. "Your Grace, when you're ready." Lydia abandoned her breakfast and followed the housekeeper into the depths of the estate. The household accounts were a nightmare wrapped in leather binding. Page after page of expenses, staff wages, supply orders, maintenance costs. Thornvale ran like a small kingdom, and apparently Lydia was supposed to manage it. "The previous Duchess handled all domestic matters," Mrs. Blackwood said, her tone suggesting the previous Duchess had been considerably more competent. "His Grace concerns himself only with business affairs and estate management. And when there was no Duchess? I managed." Mrs. Blackwood's mouth was a knife slash. "Adequately." The message was clear. "I don't need you. This household ran fine without you, and I'll resent every moment you pretend to be in charge." Lydia looked down at the accounts, at numbers that made her head spin. She'd never managed anything bigger than a small household staff, and that was before the money ran out. "Walk me through it," she said. "Everything. I want to understand how this estate functions." Mrs. Blackwood's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, that Lydia was willing to admit ignorance. "That will take considerable time, Your Grace." "Then we'd better start now." They spent 6 hours in that office. Mrs. Blackwood explained supply chains and staff rotations, and the delicate politics of managing 50 people who all thought they knew better. Lydia took notes until her hand cramped, asked questions until Mrs. Blackwood's irritation shifted into something that might have been grudging respect. "The cook is temperamental," Mrs. Blackwood warned. "She's been here 20 years and doesn't take kindly to criticism." "Then I won't criticize. I'll ask her to teach me." Lydia looked up from her notes. "I want to understand what makes this household work. All of it. Even the parts I'm not supposed to notice." Mrs. Blackwood studied her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected. Neither is this place." Lydia closed the account book. "But we'll figure each other out." That night, Lydia ate dinner alone. Adrian sent word he was working late, which apparently meant he'd eat in his study and she could rattle around the dining room like a ghost. She went to check on her father instead. He was propped up in bed, looking better than he had in months, color in his face, clarity in his eyes. The physician's new treatment was already working, or maybe it was just knowing he wasn't going to die in poverty. "Hi, Papa." Lydia sat in the chair beside his bed, taking his hand. "How are you feeling?" He made a sound, half grunt, half sigh. His good hand moved to his chest, then to hers. "Better. You?" "I'm fine." The lie came easy. "The estate is beautiful. Mrs. Blackwood is teaching me the household management. It's good." His eyes said he didn't believe her. "Really?" she insisted. "I'm adjusting." He squeezed her hand, then tapped her wedding ring with one finger, looked at her meaningfully. "The Duke he's fair. Professional." Lydia searched for words that weren't lies but weren't the whole truth either. "He keeps his promises. That's more than most men." Her father's expression softened into something like sorrow. "Don't," Lydia said quietly. "This was my choice, my decision, and it was the right one." She squeezed back. "You're safe, that's all that matters." But lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling of her beautiful cage, Lydia wondered if she'd been lying to him or to herself. The village elders arrived the next afternoon in a procession of carriages and self-importance. Lydia watched from the drawing room window as they disembarked, 5 men, all old, all dressed like they were attending a funeral. "They'll test you," Adrian said behind her. She hadn't heard him enter. "Push to see where you bend." Helpful advice. "Don't bend." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell whatever cologne he wore, something dark and cedar sharp. "You're the Duchess. They answer to you, not the other way around. Even though I have no idea what I'm doing? Especially then." He glanced at her, expression unreadable. "Confidence is a weapon. Use it." The elders filed into the drawing room like pallbearers. Mrs. Blackwood announced them one by one. Alderman Greaves, Magistrate Howell, Reverend Blackthorne, and 2 others whose names Lydia immediately forgot. They bowed to Adrian, barely nodded to her. "Gentlemen," Adrian said, not bothering with pleasantries, "my wife wanted to meet you. Make your introductions brief." Alderman Greaves stepped forward, a round man with shrewd eyes. "Your Grace, welcome to Thornvale." The words were polite. The tone was assessment. "We're pleased His Grace has finally chosen a bride." Finally, like she'd kept them waiting. "Thank you, Alderman. I look forward to serving the community." "Serving?" Magistrate Howell spoke up, a thin man with a voice like grinding stones. "That's an interesting choice of words. Most duchesses prefer overseeing." "Most duchesses weren't raised to work," Lydia said smoothly. "I prefer to understand before I oversee." Greaves exchanged glances with Howell. "Indeed. We'd heard about your circumstances. Before the marriage." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. "My circumstances," Lydia repeated, voice pleasant as poison, "taught me the value of money and the cost of failure. 2 lessons I imagine will serve this estate well." "Or drain it," Howell muttered. Adrian moved so fast Lydia barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he was 2 steps closer to Howell, all controlled menace. "Magistrate." His voice could have cut glass. "Perhaps you'd like to clarify that remark." Howell paled. "I merely meant, that is, Your Grace, I intended no disrespect. Didn't you?" Adrian didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't have to. Because it sounded remarkably like you were questioning my judgment in choosing a wife. No, of course not. Good. Adrian stepped back, dismissing Howell like he was yesterday's trash. Then I'm sure you'll extend the Duchess the same respect you'd show any woman of her station. Unless you'd prefer I find a new magistrate. Howell shut his mouth so hard Lydia heard his teeth click. The rest of the meeting was stilted, formal, pointless. The elders made their reports, harvest predictions, village disputes, maintenance needs, while carefully avoiding looking at Lydia for too long. She said little, watched everything, noted who deferred to Adrian, who resented him, who was ambitious enough to try flattery. When they finally left, she felt like she'd run a marathon. Well, Adrian asked once they were alone. That was humiliating. That was politics. He poured himself a drink from the sideboard, didn't offer her one. They wanted to see if you'd crumble. You didn't. You threatened a magistrate for me. I defended my choice. He swirled the whiskey, watching the light through amber liquid. There's a difference. Is there? His eyes met hers over the glass. You're my wife. That means something, even in a marriage like ours. People will test you. They'll question whether you deserve this position. Your job is to prove them wrong. And if I can't, then you'll fail, and I'll have made a mistake. He drank, expression giving nothing away. But I don't think I did. It should have felt like a compliment. Instead, it felt like pressure, weight settling on shoulders already bent. The weeks that followed were brutal in their own quiet way. Lydia learned the estate inch by inch, which rooms were used, which were forgotten, where the staff gossiped and what they said about her when they thought she couldn't hear. She learned that the cook really was temperamental but softened when Lydia asked about her mother's recipe for lamb stew. That the head groundskeeper had a daughter in the village who was brilliant but couldn't afford school. That 3 of the upstairs maids were related and watched each other's backs with fierce loyalty. She learned which battles to fight and which to let Mrs. Blackwood win. But society was another beast entirely. The invitations started arriving within a week. Ladies' teas, garden parties, charitable functions. All of them traps dressed in nice stationery. You don't have to go, Adrian said when she mentioned it. Let them whisper. It doesn't matter. It matters if they think I'm hiding. Are you? Yes. No. He looked at her like he could see right through the lie. Do what you think is right. But understand, they'll tear you apart the moment you give them the chance. The first tea was at Lady Ashford's estate, and walking through those doors felt like stepping into an arena. 20 women, all silk and sharp smiles, all watching as Lydia entered. The conversation didn't stop. That would have been too obvious. But it shifted, sharpened, aimed. Duchess Thornvale, Lady Ashford greeted her with air kisses that missed by miles. How lovely you could join us. We were just discussing the upcoming charity auction. How charitable, Lydia murmured. Indeed, we're raising funds for the village orphanage. Lady Ashford guided her to a seat that felt like a stage. I'm sure you'll want to contribute. Your husband is so generous. The emphasis on your husband wasn't subtle. I'll certainly discuss it with His Grace. Oh, but surely you don't need permission. Lady Pemberton, Edmund's mother, spoke up from across the room. Most duchesses have their own funds. There it was, the knife wrapped in silk. Most duchesses, Lydia said pleasantly, weren't raised to understand the value of asking before spending someone else's money. A few women hid smiles. Lady Pemberton's face went tight. How prudent of you. The rest of the tea was warfare by other means. Compliments that were insults. Questions designed to expose ignorance. Laughter at jokes Lydia wasn't meant to understand. She smiled through all of it. Drank terrible tea, ate tiny sandwiches that tasted like dust. And when Lady Ashford cornered her by the garden windows, voice low and confidential, Lydia knew the real attack was coming. My dear, I feel I should warn you. Lady Ashford's concern was as genuine as fool's gold. People are talking. People always talk. Yes, but this is different. They're saying you trapped the Duke, that you used your family's misfortune to manipulate a marriage proposal. She paused, letting that sink in. Some even suggest that you might be carrying another man's child. Lydia's vision went white at the edges. That's a lie. Of course it is. Lady Ashford's hand on her arm was pure condescension. But you know how gossip spreads. Unless you do something to prove them wrong, the rumors will only grow worse. What would you suggest? Be seen with the Duke, publicly. Show society that this is a real marriage, not just a transaction. Lady Ashford smiled like she was being helpful. Otherwise, I'm afraid the whispers will destroy what little reputation you have left. Lydia left that tea feeling filthy, like she needed to scrub her skin raw. She found Adrian in his study that evening, working by lamplight. He didn't look up when she entered. They're saying I trapped you, she said without preamble. That I'm carrying another man's child. That this marriage is a fraud. I know. Still didn't look up. I heard the same rumors 3 days ago. And you didn't tell me? Why would I? Now he glanced up, expression mild. They're lies. Lies don't matter. They matter when they affect your reputation. My reputation survived worse. He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. What do you want me to do about it? Lydia opened her mouth, closed it. What did she want? For him to defend her? To care that people were dragging her name through filth? Lady Ashford suggested we appear together, publicly, to prove the marriage is real. Is that what you want? I want them to stop looking at me like I'm a criminal. Then you'll be disappointed. Adrian stood, moving around the desk with that controlled grace he had. They'll always look at you that way. You married up. They resent it. Nothing you do will change that. So I should just accept it? I'm saying choose your battles. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You can waste energy trying to win their approval, or you can focus on things that actually matter. Like what? Like learning to run this estate. Like being useful instead of liked. His voice softened just slightly. They don't have to love you, Lydia. They just have to respect you. You called me Lydia again. Did I? He didn't step back, didn't apologize, just looked at her with those storm gray eyes that gave nothing away. My mistake, Your Grace. But he didn't move, and neither did she. The moment stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then someone knocked on the door, and Adrian stepped back like nothing had happened. Enter. It was Mrs. Blackwood, apologetic. Your Grace, the steward needs a word about the northern tenant farms. There's been a dispute. I'll be there shortly. Adrian's attention was already shifting away from Lydia, back to the estate, to business, to everything that actually mattered to him. Lydia left before she could feel dismissed. The charity auction Lady Ashford mentioned turned out to be the social event of the season. Everyone who was anyone would be there, dressed to kill and ready to spend money they didn't need on things they didn't want. You should go, Adrian said over breakfast 3 days before. Show your face. Donate something modest. Will you be there? No? Then neither will I. He looked up from his newspaper, something like surprise crossing his face. You're turning down a chance to prove yourself? I'm refusing to dance alone while they throw stones. Lydia cut her toast with more force than necessary. If you want me to represent this duchy, fine, but I won't be paraded like a show dog without you there. I don't attend social functions. Make an exception. Why should I? Because I'm your wife, and I'm asking. She met his eyes steadily. You said people would test me. Well, they're testing us, both of us. And if you hide while they tear me apart, you're proving every rumor true. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his newspaper with careful precision. 1 hour. That's all I'll give. 2. 1.5. Done. Lydia felt something like victory, small but real. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. You might regret it. The night of the auction, Lydia wore midnight blue silk that Adrian's money had bought and jewels that felt like chains of ice around her throat. Her maid had woven her hair into something elaborate that would take an hour to undo. She looked like a duchess, felt like an imposter. Adrian waited at the bottom of the stairs, devastating in black evening wear that made him look like elegance weaponized. His eyes traveled over her once, clinical as an appraisal. You'll do. Such flattery. I'm overwhelmed. His mouth almost smiled. Ready? No, but I'll pretend. Good enough. The ballroom where the auction was held blazed with light and laughter. Every face turned when they entered, the Iron Duke and his scandal of a bride. Lydia felt their stares like knives. Adrian's hand settled on the small of her back, warm through the silk. Not affection, just possession, making it clear she belonged to him. Smile, he murmured. You're supposed to look happy. She smiled. It probably looked like a grimace. They made their way through the crowd, Adrian nodding to people who mattered, ignoring those who didn't. Lydia followed his lead, trying not to stumble in heels that were more weapon than shoe. Thornvale! A booming voice cut through the noise. Lord Carmichael, one of Adrian's business associates, pushed through the crowd with his wife in tow. Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you'd sworn off these things. I'm making an exception. Adrian's hand tightened slightly on Lydia's back. You remember my wife. Of course, Duchess, you look lovely. Carmichael beamed like a friendly bear. His wife, Lady Carmichael, was less enthusiastic. Your Grace. The title sounded grudging. What a surprise to see you both. Life is full of them, Lydia said sweetly. They moved on. More introductions, more forced smiles, more of that awful feeling of being examined like livestock. Then she saw him. Edmund Pemberton, standing by the auction tables, laughing with a blonde woman who hung on his arm like decoration. Their eyes met across the room. Edmund's smile faltered, then sharpened into something cruel. He started toward them. Adrian, Lydia said quietly, urgently. I see him. Adrian's voice was flat, empty of everything except cold calculation. Let him come. Edmund stopped 3 feet away, that familiar smirk painted on his face. Thornvale, Duchess, what a pleasant surprise. Pemberton. Adrian didn't offer his hand. I'd say the same, but I'd be lying. Edmund's smile tightened. Still charming as ever, I see. And Lydia, I'm sorry, Duchess, you look well. Marriage clearly agrees with you. More than engagement ever did. Ouch! Edmund pressed a hand to his chest in mock pain. Still bitter, I see. Bored, actually. Lydia kept her voice light, disinterested. Was there something you wanted, or are you just here to make a spectacle of yourself? I wanted to congratulate you both. It's not every day a woman manages to trade up from ruin to a duchy. His eyes slid to Adrian. Though I wonder how long His Grace will tolerate a wife who brings nothing but debts and disgrace to his name. Adrian moved faster than thought. One moment he was beside Lydia, the next he had Edmund by the front of his jacket, lifting him slightly onto his toes. Say another word, Adrian said, voice soft as velvet and twice as dangerous, and I'll make sure every business deal you've got falls through, every investment turns sour, every door you need opened stays locked. He smiled, and it was terrifying. Test me, please. Edmund had gone pale. You wouldn't I? Adrian released him with a small shove. Ask anyone here what happened to the last man who disrespected my wife. Go ahead, ask. Edmund stumbled back, straightening his jacket with shaking hands. The blonde woman beside him looked like she wanted to disappear. The entire ballroom had gone quiet. Adrian turned back to Lydia, offering his arm like nothing had happened. Shall we? She took it, heart hammering, and they walked away while Edmund stood there looking like he'd been hit by a carriage. You didn't have to do that, Lydia said once they were out of earshot. Yes, I did. Adrian's jaw was tight. He needed to understand. Understand what? That you're mine. He looked down at her, eyes fierce. Contract or not, arrangement or not, you're my wife, and I protect what's mine. Something in Lydia's chest cracked open. They left shortly after, Adrian's hour and a half fulfilled. The ride home was silent, but it was different than before. Charged somehow, like lightning waiting to strike. At the estate, Adrian walked her to her chamber door. Stopped there, standing too close in the dim hallway. Thank you, Lydia said quietly. For tonight, Don't. His hand came up, thumb brushing her cheek so lightly she almost imagined it. Don't thank me for doing what any husband should. But you're not any husband. No, his voice was rough. I'm not. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Really kiss her, not the clinical press of lips from their wedding. But he stepped back, the moment breaking like glass. "Good night, Lydia." He was gone before she could answer, leaving her standing in the hallway with her heart in her throat and the feeling that something had shifted between them, something dangerous and inevitable and completely terrifying. Lydia didn't sleep that night. She lay in her enormous bed staring at the connecting door to Adrian's chambers, replaying the way his thumb had brushed her cheek, the roughness in his voice when he'd said her name. "I protect what's mine." The words circled in her mind like wolves. By dawn, she'd convinced herself it meant nothing. Adrian was protecting his investment, his reputation, his choice. Not her. Never her. She dressed before the sun fully rose and went to check on her father. He was awake, propped against pillows, and his eyes lit up when she entered. "Morning, Papa." She kissed his forehead. "How are you feeling?" He made a humming sound. Better. His good hand reached for hers, squeezed with strength that hadn't been there a month ago. The physician's treatments were working. Her father was healing, getting stronger, remembering how to live instead of just survive. Because of Adrian. Because of this marriage. Because Lydia had sold herself and somehow bought both their futures. "I attended a charity auction last night," she said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "With the Duke." Her father's eyebrows rose. Surprise and something else. Hope, maybe. "Don't look at me like that. It was for appearances, nothing more." But her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. He gave her a look that said he wasn't convinced. "Really, we have an arrangement, professional, cold." She twisted her wedding ring, the weight of it suddenly oppressive. "He defended me last night, humiliated Edmund in front of everyone. But that doesn't mean it's not." Her father reached up, tapped her chest over her heart, then pointed to the connecting door visible through her chamber entrance. "No," Lydia said firmly. "Absolutely not. You don't understand. Adrian Thornvale doesn't do emotion. He's all calculation and control. Last night was about reputation, not—" A knock interrupted her. Mrs. Blackwood entered, her expression grave. "Your Grace? Forgive the intrusion, but you're needed downstairs. There's been an incident." Lydia's stomach dropped. "What kind of incident?" "The tenants from the northern farms. They've come to the estate, all of them." Mrs. Blackwood's voice was tight. "They're demanding to speak with His Grace." "Where's the Duke?" "Already meeting with them in the main courtyard. But Your Grace—" She hesitated. "They're angry, very angry. The steward is concerned about violence." Lydia was moving before Mrs. Blackwood finished speaking. The main courtyard was chaos. 50 people at least, maybe more. Men in work clothes, women with children clinging to their skirts, faces hard with desperation and fury. They surrounded Adrian, who stood on the front steps with the stillness of a man facing down a storm. "Can't feed our families on promises," one man shouted. He was built like a bear, hands scarred from farm work. "The rents went up again, Your Grace. 3rd time in 2 years. We're bleeding dry." "The rents are fair market value," the steward said from beside Adrian, his voice reedy with nerves. "Adjusted for inflation?" "Fair?" A woman pushed forward, thin as a rail, holding a baby that looked too small. "You call it fair when we can't afford grain? When children go to bed hungry?" The crowd surged forward. Adrian's guards tensed, hands going to weapons. "Stand down," Adrian ordered his men. Then to the crowd, "I understand your concerns." "You understand nothing," the bear man spat at Adrian's feet. "You sit in your fancy estate while we starve. You and your new duchess, dripping in jewels." "Careful." Adrian's voice went cold as winter. "You're upset. I'm allowing that. But insult my wife again, and we're done talking." "Done talking? We were never talking. You dictate, we obey." "That's how it works," the steward interrupted. "His Grace owns the land. You rent it. Those are the terms." The crowd exploded. Shouts, accusations, rage boiling over into something dangerous. Someone threw a rock. It missed Adrian by inches, shattering against the stone wall behind him. The guards drew swords. "No!" Lydia's voice cut through the chaos. She was running down the steps before she realized she'd moved, putting herself between Adrian and the crowd. "Put the weapons away, now!" "Your Grace," one guard started. "Do it." She turned to face the mob, heart hammering so hard she thought they could hear it. 50 angry faces stared back at her. 50 people who saw her as the enemy, the symbol of everything they couldn't have. "You're right," she said, loud enough to carry. "I don't understand what it's like to watch your children starve. Not the way you do." "Lydia," Adrian's hand closed on her elbow, trying to pull her back. She shook him off. "But I do understand hunger. I understand choosing between food and medicine, between heating and eating, and—" Her voice was steady despite the fear threading through her veins. "6 months ago, my family was drowning in debt. Creditors at the door, no money for anything. My father had a stroke because of the stress." The crowd was quieting, listening despite themselves. "I married the Duke to save my father's life," Lydia continued. "Not for love, not for titles, for survival. Because sometimes you do what you have to do, even when it destroys you." "That's different," someone started. "Is it?" She looked at the thin woman with the baby. "You'd do anything for your children. I did anything for my father. We're the same, desperate people making impossible choices." "You live in a palace now," the bear man growled. "Hard to claim you understand struggle." "You're right. I live here. I eat well. I'm safe." Lydia took a breath. "But I remember what it was like when I wasn't, and I can do something about it." "Like what?" The woman's voice was sharp with distrust. "Give us charity? Throw coins at us like we're beggars?" "No, like fixing whatever's broken in the rent system." Lydia glanced back at Adrian. His face was unreadable, but he hadn't stopped her. "Give me 2 weeks. Let me look at the books, understand the finances, figure out what's fair. If the rents are too high, we'll adjust them." "We?" The steward looked horrified. "Your Grace, you can't possibly—" "2 weeks," Lydia repeated, ignoring him. "And in the meantime, no one goes hungry. The estate will provide grain and supplies to any family in need. No cost." The bear man's eyes narrowed. "And what's to stop His Grace from going back on your word?" "Me." Lydia straightened her spine. "I'm the Duchess. I'm making this promise. If he breaks it, I'll break him." The crowd stared. Adrian made a sound behind her that might have been shock or amusement or fury. She couldn't tell. 2 weeks, the thin woman said slowly. "And then what?" "Then we meet again, same place, and I'll tell you what I found and what I'm doing about it." Lydia met her eyes. "I can't promise to fix everything, but I promise to try." "That's more than you had this morning." For a long moment, no one moved. Then the woman nodded, shifted her baby to her other hip. 2 weeks. But if you're lying to us, I'm not." The crowd began to disperse, slowly, reluctantly. The bear man was last to leave, giving Lydia a look that was equal parts respect and warning. When they were gone, Lydia turned to find Adrian staring at her like she'd grown a second head. "What?" he said, voice dangerously soft. "Was that?" "That was me keeping your tenants from rioting. By promising things you have no authority to deliver." The steward was nearly apoplectic. "Your Grace, the rents are set by contract. We can't just—" "Show me the contracts," Lydia said. "Now. You can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious. You work for my husband, which means you work for me. Show me the contracts, the ledgers, everything, or I'll find someone who will." The steward looked at Adrian, desperate for support. Adrian was still staring at Lydia. "Do what she says." "Your Grace!" "You heard me. Give her access to everything." Adrian stepped closer to Lydia, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "My study. Now." He turned and walked back into the estate. Lydia followed, feeling like she was marching toward execution. Adrian's study door slammed shut behind them. "Are you out of your mind?" He rounded on her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Adrian Thornvale looked rattled. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I stopped a riot." "You undermined my authority in front of 50 tenants. You made promises using estate funds without consulting me. You—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You put yourself between me and an angry mob." "Someone had to do something. That someone should have been me." "Oh, you were about to have your guards attack them," Lydia shot back. "I saw your face. You were ready to put down the rebellion with force. Because force is what they understand. They understand hunger, desperation. They understand being pushed until they have nothing left to lose. Her voice cracked. I've been there, Adrian. I know what it looks like when people stop caring about consequences because the consequences can't get worse. Adrian went very still. Don't pretend you understand. I do understand. 6 months ago, I was contemplating things I never thought I'd consider. Ways out that weren't really ways out at all. Just... She stopped, throat tight. I understand desperation, and I saw it in those people's eyes, so yes, I made promises. Because angry people need hope more than they need another lord telling them to obey. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The rents aren't too high, Adrian said finally, quietly. They're industry standard. Then why are people starving? Because farming is hard, weather is unpredictable, bad harvests happen. He moved to the window, staring out at nothing. You can't save everyone, Lydia. I can try. And when you fail, when you dig through those ledgers and find out the money isn't there to lower the rents, what then? He looked back at her. They'll hate you, call you a liar. Everything you just built with them will crumble. Then I'll deal with it. Why? The question came out raw. Why do you care about tenant farmers you've never met? Why risk my anger, my steward's resistance, all of it, for people who would have thrown rocks at you an hour ago? Lydia met his eyes. Because someone cared about me when I had nothing. You did. And maybe your reasons were practical. Maybe this marriage is just a contract, but you saved me anyway. So now I'm going to save someone else. Adrian stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. You're going to get hurt, he said quietly. This world doesn't reward kindness. I'm not being kind. I'm being strategic. Lydia crossed her arms. Happy tenants are productive tenants. Desperate people rebel. I'm protecting your investment. Is that what you're telling yourself? It's what I'm telling you. His mouth almost smiled. Almost. You're either brilliant or insane. Can I be both? This time he did smile, small but real, and something in Lydia's chest went warm. 2 weeks, he said. You want access to the estate finances? You have it, but understand, if this backfires, it's on you. I know. And if you need help, he hesitated. Ask. I thought you wanted me to handle things myself. I do. But I also don't want to watch you drown. He moved closer, and Lydia's pulse kicked up. You're my wife. That means something, remember? I remember. For a heartbeat, they just stood there, too close and not close enough. Then Adrian stepped back, the moment fracturing. I'll have the steward bring you the ledgers, all of them. He moved to his desk, already shifting back into business mode. Don't make me regret this. I'll try not to. Lydia left before she could do something stupid like ask him what that almost smile meant, or why his voice had gone soft when he called her his wife. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. Lydia buried herself in ledgers and contracts, numbers that blurred together until her eyes ached. Mrs. Blackwood helped, grudgingly at first, then with something approaching approval when she realized Lydia wasn't just pretending to care. The rents are fair, Mrs. Blackwood admitted on day 5. By any standard measure, but the problem isn't the rents. Then what is it? The market prices, grain sells for half what it used to. Same with livestock. The tenants are producing at the same rate but earning less, so the rents feel higher, even though they're not. Lydia rubbed her temples. Can we subsidize the difference? Not indefinitely. The estate is wealthy, but it's not infinite. Then we need to find a way to increase what they earn. Lydia stared at the numbers until they swam. What if we cut out the middlemen, sell directly to markets in the city? Mrs. Blackwood looked thoughtful. It's possible, but it would require contracts, transport, coordination. Can it be done? If you're willing to fight for it. Mrs. Blackwood's expression was almost approving. The merchants won't like losing their cut. Let them hate me. I'm used to it. Lydia spent the next week fighting. She drafted proposals, negotiated with city market managers, argued with merchants who saw their profits threatened. Adrian watched from the sidelines, offering advice when she asked, stepping in when doors wouldn't open for a woman, but would for a duke. They worked together without meaning to, falling into a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. You're good at this, he said one evening, finding her in the estate office surrounded by papers. At making enemies? At not backing down. He leaned against the doorframe, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Most people would have given up by now. Most people didn't promise 50 tenants they'd fix their lives. No, most people are smarter than that. But he was smiling when he said it. On day 13, Lydia finalized the contracts. Direct sales to 3 major city markets, higher prices for the tenants' grain, a transport system using estate resources. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't make anyone rich, but it would help. "You did it," Mrs. Blackwood said, looking over the final papers. "I didn't think you could." "Neither did I." The meeting with the tenants was scheduled for the next day. Lydia barely slept, running through what she'd say, how she'd explain the solution, whether it would be enough. Adrian found her at dawn, pacing in the courtyard. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. Means you care." He stepped closer, and in the pale morning light he looked almost gentle. "You're going to do fine." "What if I'm not? What if they hate the solution? What if—" "Then we'll figure it out. Together." His hand came up, cupping her jaw the way he had that night after the auction. "I meant what I said, Lydia. You're not alone in this." Her breath caught. "Why are you helping me?" "Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a contract." His thumb brushed her cheek, and the touch sent heat through her veins. "I don't know when it happened, but it did." "Adrian!" The sound of hoofbeats interrupted her. A rider tore into the courtyard, nearly falling off his horse in his haste. "Your Grace!" The man was wild-eyed, breathing hard. "You need to come. Now. The northern farmhouse. There's been a fire. Multiple casualties. They're saying—" He stopped, looking at Lydia with something like fear. "They're saying it was deliberately set, and they're blaming the Duchess." The world tilted. "What?" Adrian's voice was deadly calm. "Explain." "The bear, Thomas Grayson, he's telling everyone the Duchess promised changes she couldn't deliver, that she was lying from the start, that the fire is a warning of what happens when the nobility plays games with their lives." The rider swallowed hard. "Your Grace, they're calling for her head." Adrian's face went cold, all the softness from moments before vanishing like it had never existed. "How many injured?" "3 dead. 5 more badly burned, including Grayson's daughter." Lydia's knees went weak. Dead. People were dead. Children were dead. "It wasn't me," she whispered. I was trying to help." "I know." Adrian's voice was steel. "Stay here. I'll handle this." "No." Lydia found her voice, her spine. "They're blaming me. I need to face them." "Absolutely not. If they're violent, then let them be violent." She grabbed his arm. "I made them a promise, Adrian. I'm keeping it, whether they believe me or not." "Lydia, I'm going, with or without you." He stared at her, jaw tight, something warring in his expression. Then he nodded once, sharp. "We go together, but if it gets dangerous, you do exactly what I say. Understood?" "Understood." The ride to the northern farms felt like riding toward execution. The burned farmhouse came into view, blackened timbers, smoke still rising, the smell of death heavy in the air. A crowd had gathered, bigger than before, angrier. And at the center stood Thomas Grayson, the bear man, his face twisted with grief and rage. "Murderers!" he screamed when he saw them coming. "You did this! You and your pretty words!" Adrian dismounted, helped Lydia down. His guards formed a barrier, but Lydia pushed through them. "I didn't set that fire," she said, loud enough to carry. "I would never—" "Liar!" Grayson lunged forward. "My daughter is dead, 8 years old and burned alive because of your promises." Lydia's vision blurred with tears. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring her back." He was crying now, big shoulders shaking. "You said you'd help. You said we could trust you, and now my little girl—" "I have the contracts." Lydia's voice broke. "The market agreements. Everything I promised. It's done. It's real." "It doesn't matter." A woman from the crowd, the thin one with the baby, stepped forward. "Don't you see? Even if you meant well, we're too far gone. One fire, and everything we had is ash. Your contracts won't rebuild homes, won't bring back the dead. Then I'll rebuild them, Lydia said desperately. The estate will cover all damages, new homes, supplies, everything. With what? The steward's voice cut through the crowd. Lydia turned to see him standing at the edge, face pale. Your Grace, I tried to tell you. The money for those contracts, it had to come from somewhere. We borrowed against future revenues. The estate coffers are nearly empty. The bottom dropped out of Lydia's stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying there's no money for rebuilding, no emergency funds. You spent it all on your market schemes. The steward looked almost satisfied. You wanted to play Duchess? This is what happens when amateurs meddle in estate finances. The crowd erupted. Accusations, rage, despair mixing into something that sounded like violence waiting to break. Adrian stepped forward, voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone calm down. Calm? Grayson's face was purple with fury. Your wife destroyed us, and you let her. I approved every contract because you were bewitched by a pretty face and a sob story. The steward was emboldened now, sensing blood in the water. Everyone knows she trapped you into marriage. Now she's bankrupting the estate with her delusions of charity. That's enough. Adrian's voice could have frozen fire. But the steward wasn't done. The truth needs to be said, Your Grace. This woman is a cancer, a liar, who... Adrian's fist connected with the steward's jaw so fast Lydia barely saw it move. The man went down hard, blood streaming from his mouth. The next person, Adrian said quietly, dangerously, who insults my wife will meet the same fate. Tenant or staff, I don't care. The crowd went silent. Grayson stepped forward, tears still wet on his face. Your threats mean nothing to me, Your Grace. I've already lost everything. He pulled a knife from his belt. Lydia didn't think. She stepped in front of Adrian, arms spread wide. Then kill me, she said. I'm the one you blame. I'm the one who failed you. So do it. Lydia, move. Adrian tried to push her aside. She held her ground. No, he deserves this. They all do. She looked at Grayson, at the knife shaking in his hand. I'm sorry I couldn't save your daughter. I'm sorry my help came too late. But I meant every promise. And if my death makes that mean something, then take it. The knife wavered. Grayson's face crumpled. I don't want your death. I want my child back. I know. Lydia's voice was gentle. And I can't give you that. But I can give you everything else I promised. The contracts are real. The market access is real. It'll take time, but it'll work. Time won't rebuild my house. No, but I will. Lydia looked at Adrian, at his furious, terrified face. We will. Even if we have to sell every piece of jewelry, every painting, every luxury, your homes will be rebuilt. You can't promise that, the steward wheezed from the ground. Watch me, Lydia said, not looking away from Grayson. I'm the Duchess of Thornvale, and I'm done playing nice. Grayson lowered the knife. His shoulders collapsed inward, grief swallowing rage. If you're lying to us again, I'm not. Lydia reached out, took his scarred hand in hers. I swear on my mother's grave, I will fix this. For a long moment, Grayson just stood there. Then he nodded, once, and turned away. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving Lydia standing in the ashes with Adrian's hand locked around her wrist. Don't ever, he said, voice shaking with fury or fear or both. Put yourself in front of a knife for me again. Why not? You'd do the same. That's different. It's not. Lydia pulled her wrist free. You protect what's yours, remember? Well, so do I. And somewhere along the way, you became mine too. Adrian stared at her like she'd just rewritten every rule he lived by. Then he kissed her. Not controlled, not clinical. Desperate and rough and real, his hands in her hair, her back against the nearest wall, months of ice melting into fire. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian's forehead rested against hers. You're going to destroy me, he whispered. Good, Lydia whispered back. Because you already destroyed me first. They pulled apart slowly, like breaking the surface after drowning. Adrian's hands still tangled in her hair, Lydia's fingers gripping his jacket hard enough to wrinkle the fabric. Neither of them moved away. We should go, Adrian said, voice rough. but he didn't let go. Yes. Lydia's heart was still racing. We should. They stayed there another heartbeat, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. Then the sound of footsteps made them step apart, propriety slamming back into place like a prison door. Mrs. Blackwood appeared around the corner of the burned farmhouse, her face carefully neutral. Your Grace, the steward has been escorted back to the estate. The physician is tending to the injured, and… She paused, something almost like approval flickering in her expression. The tenants are asking when reconstruction will begin. Lydia straightened her dress, tried to look like she hadn't just been kissed senseless against a stone wall. Tomorrow. We start tomorrow. Art. With what funds? Mrs. Blackwood's question wasn't cruel, just practical. The steward was correct, unfortunately. The estate coffers are severely depleted. Then we'll find money. Lydia's mind was already racing. The jewelry, the paintings, everything non-essential gets sold. Your Grace. Mrs. Blackwood looked genuinely shocked. Those are family heirlooms. Some have been in the Thornvale line for generations. And they'll mean nothing if this estate falls apart. Lydia looked at Adrian. Unless you object? His smile was sharp as a knife. Object to my wife showing more backbone than half the men I know? Hardly. He turned to Mrs. Blackwood. Make a list. Everything valuable that isn't nailed down. We'll start with my mother's collection. She had terrible taste anyway. The ride back to the estate was different than the ride out. Adrian's hand rested on Lydia's knee, warm through the fabric of her dress. Not possessive. Grounding. Like he needed to touch her to believe she was real. That was the stupidest thing you've ever done, he said quietly. Which part? The promises or the knife? The knife. His hand tightened. You could have been killed. So could you. I'm used to that risk. You're not. I'm getting used to it. Lydia looked out the window at the countryside rolling past. This world you live in, it's brutal. Everyone playing games, everyone looking for weakness to exploit. I thought society was bad, but this is worse. This is people's lives. Now you understand why I'm the way I am. Adrian's voice was flat. Emotion is weakness. Sentiment gets people killed, so I cut it all out and became exactly what they feared. The Iron Duke. Yes. But that's not who you are. Lydia turned to look at him. Not really. That's just armor. It's safer than the alternative. Maybe, but it's lonely. Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. Back at the estate, chaos waited. The former steward had already started spreading poison, telling the staff that Lydia was bankrupting them all, that her schemes would ruin the estate, that Adrian had been manipulated by a fortune hunter. He's in the blue guest room, Mrs. Blackwood reported, her distaste evident. Under guard. His jaw is quite badly broken. Good, Adrian said without sympathy. Let him stew. We'll deal with him later. But the damage was done. Lydia could feel it in the way the servants looked at her, uncertain, worried, wondering if she really was destroying everything. She called a meeting, every member of staff, from the head housekeeper to the scullery maids. They assembled in the main hall, 50 faces watching her with varying degrees of suspicion. Lydia stood on the stairs where everyone could see her, Adrian beside her like a pillar of stone. I know what you've heard, she began, that I've emptied the estate coffers, that I'm reckless, foolish, playing games with your livelihoods. She paused. Some of that is true. I did spend significant funds. I made decisions without fully understanding the consequences, and yes, we're in a difficult financial position now. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. But here's what the steward didn't tell you. The contracts I negotiated will increase tenant revenues by 40% within a year. That means more stable income for the estate, which means more stable employment for you. The money I spent wasn't wasted, it was invested. Investments don't pay wages, someone called out. No, but this does. Lydia gestured to Adrian, who stepped forward with a ledger. Every person in this room will receive their full wages, on time for the next 6 months, Adrian said, his voice carrying authority that made people straighten. Guaranteed. From my personal accounts if necessary. No one loses their position, no one goes unpaid. You have my word. The murmurs changed tone. Surprise. Cautious hope. But in exchange, Lydia continued, I need your help. The northern farms need rebuilding. The tenants need supplies. We're selling non-essential items to fund it, but it'll take coordination, hard work, and trust. She looked at each face one by one. I'm asking you to trust me. Not because I've earned it, but because we're all in this together now. Why should we? An older footman spoke up, his face skeptical. You're not from here. You don't know us. You could walk away tomorrow. I could, Lydia agreed, but I won't. This is my home now. You're my people, and I don't abandon my people. Pretty words. I stood in front of a knife today, Lydia interrupted, for a man who wanted me dead, because I'd rather die than break a promise to people who are depending on me. Her voice was steady. So yes, these are words, but they're backed by action. Watch me. Judge me by what I do, not what I say. And if I fail you, then you can call me a liar. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Mrs. Blackwood stepped forward. I'll help. Her Grace has proven herself capable, if unconventional. The staff will follow my lead. One by one, others nodded. Not all of them. Some still looked doubtful. But enough. Enough to start. The next week was organized chaos. Lydia cataloged every valuable item in the estate: jewelry, paintings, sculptures, rare books, anything that could be sold without crippling the household's function. Adrian's mother's collection alone was worth a fortune. Emeralds and diamonds, necklaces that weighed like chains, bracelets that could have fed a family for years. She loved beautiful things, Adrian said, watching Lydia sort through the jewelry. Collected them like trophies. Never wore half of it. Did you love her? I respected her. Love wasn't... He stopped. It wasn't something we did in my family. That's sad. That's survival. But his voice was softer than usual. My parents married for power, had children for heirs, died in a carriage accident before they could ruin me completely. Lydia looked up at him. How old were you? 19. Old enough to inherit, young enough to be terrified. He picked up a sapphire necklace, let it catch the light. Everyone expected me to fail, to crumble under the pressure, so I became something that couldn't crumble. Something cold and hard and untouchable. You're not untouchable. His eyes met hers. I was. Until you. The jewelry sold faster than expected. Lydia had worried no one would buy from a duke selling off family heirlooms. It reeked of desperation. But Adrian's reputation for ruthlessness worked in their favor. People assumed he was liquidating assets strategically, not scrambling for funds. Within 2 weeks, they had enough to start reconstruction. Lydia went to the northern farms herself, bringing wagons loaded with supplies. Lumber, tools, grain, medicine. Thomas Grayson watched her arrive with eyes still hollow from grief. You came back, he said. I told you I would. People say a lot of things. I know. Lydia climbed down from the wagon. Which is why I'm here, to prove I meant it. Grayson looked at the supplies, at the workers Adrian had sent to help rebuild. His throat worked. My daughter, I can't bring her back. I would if I could. Lydia's voice was gentle. But I can make sure her death meant something, that it led to change instead of more suffering. You think that makes it better? No, nothing makes it better, but maybe it makes it bearable. Grayson was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once and started unloading lumber. The rebuilding took months. Lydia split her time between managing the estate and overseeing reconstruction. She learned carpentry from the workers, basic masonry, how to coordinate supply chains so materials arrived when needed. The tenants watched her work alongside them, skepticism slowly shifting to something else. Not quite trust, not quite respect, but acknowledgement at least that she was trying. The market contracts started paying off. The first shipment of grain sold for double what the middlemen used to pay. The second did even better. By the third month, the tenants were seeing real profit increases. It's working, Mrs. Blackwood reported one evening, reviewing the accounts. The numbers are actually working. In another 6 months, the estate will be back to full financial stability. Lydia slumped in her chair, exhausted. Thank the stars. Thank yourself. This was your strategy. Adrian helped. His Grace supported you, Mrs. Blackwood corrected, but the ideas were yours, the execution was yours. You did this. It felt strange hearing that, strange and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Adrian found her later that night, standing in the estate's library, staring at nothing. You should be celebrating, he said. I'm too tired to celebrate. Then rest. He pulled her against his chest, arms wrapping around her waist. It had become natural somehow, these touches. These small intimacies that weren't part of their contract but had grown anyway, like weeds through stone. I keep thinking about Grayson's daughter, Lydia admitted, about how she died before things got better. You can't save everyone. I know, but I wanted to save her. That's what makes you dangerous, Shah. Adrian's breath was warm against her hair. You actually care. In a world full of people playing games, you're trying to save lives. It's either going to change everything or destroy you. Which do you think it'll be? Both, he said quietly. Probably both. The charity season was in full swing by the time the northern farms were rebuilt. Invitations flooded in, balls, galas, garden parties. All the same people who'd mocked Lydia months ago, now curious about the Duchess, who'd turned tenant riots into economic reform. You should go, Adrian said over breakfast. Show them what you've accomplished. I don't want their approval. No, but you want their fear. He looked at her over his newspaper. They'll whisper about you either way. Better they whisper about your power than your weakness. So Lydia went to Lady Ashford's spring gala, wearing a dress that cost less than the supplies she'd bought for the farms, but looked like it cost more. Emeralds at her throat, the only piece of jewelry she'd kept from the sales. The ballroom went quiet when she entered. Lady Ashford recovered first, gliding over with her practiced smile. Duchess Thornvale, what a surprise. We'd heard you were quite busy with estate matters. I was. But I'm here now. Yes. And looking well, despite the rumors. Lydia tilted her head. Which rumors? That I bankrupted my husband's estate, or that I started a peasant rebellion? Lady Ashford's smile tightened. I'm sure those are all exaggerations. Mostly, Lydia accepted a glass of champagne from a passing servant. Though I did negotiate market contracts that increased tenant revenues by 40%, and I did sell half the estate's heirlooms, so some of the rumors are true. How innovative. How necessary. Lydia sipped her champagne. But you wouldn't know about that, would you? About necessity? Color spotted Lady Ashford's cheeks. I'm not sure I understand. I think you do. Lydia's smile was pleasant as poison. You threw me to the wolves when my family fell, watched me suffer, and did nothing. Then you invited me to your ball to see if the Duke of Thornvale had been foolish enough to actually marry the ruined Harrow girl. She paused. He wasn't foolish. He was strategic, and I've repaid that strategy by making his estate more profitable than it's been in a decade. Lady Ashford opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't seem to find words. Enjoy your party, Lydia said sweetly, and walked away. She found Lady Pemberton next, Edmund's mother, holding court by the windows. Duchess, Lady Pemberton said coldly when Lydia approached. Lady Pemberton, how lovely to see you. Is your son here? Edmund he's attending to business matters. Pity. I wanted to thank him. Lydia's expression was innocent. If he hadn't destroyed my reputation, I never would have married Adrian, and I never would have discovered I'm actually quite good at estate management. So really, I owe your family a debt. Lady Pemberton's face went purple. You're mocking me. I'm being sincere. Edmund did me a favor. He showed me that pretty words mean nothing, that society's approval is worthless, that the only thing that matters is what you actually build. Lydia's smile sharpened. I've built something remarkable. What has Edmund built, besides a reputation for cruelty and cowardice? How dare you? Quite easily, actually. Lydia turned away. Give him my regards. The whispers followed her through the ballroom, but they were different now. Not mocking, not pitying, wary, respectful, afraid. She'd become what Adrian was, something sharp and dangerous that people stepped carefully around. The night of the ball, Lydia returned to the estate feeling strange, powerful, and hollow at the same time. She'd won. She'd proven herself. So why did it feel empty? Adrian was waiting in her chambers. He'd never done that before. Never crossed the boundary of her private space without invitation. "How was the gala?" he asked. Satisfying, brutal. Lydia started removing her jewelry. "I made Lady Ashford speechless and reduced Lady Pemberton to stuttering rage. Does that make me a terrible person?" "It makes you effective." Adrian moved behind her, his fingers working at the clasp of her necklace. "Though I'm impressed you went for the throat so elegantly." "I learned from the best." The necklace came free. Adrian's hands lingered on her shoulders, warm through the silk of her dress. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Is that bad?" "No, it's—" He paused. "It's terrifying, in the best way." Lydia turned to face him. "Why are you here, Adrian?" "Because I can't stay away anymore." His hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "Because somewhere between the wedding and now, this stopped being a contract and became something real. And I don't know what to do with that." "Neither do I." "Lydia." Her name on his lips was rough, desperate. "I'm not good at this. At feelings. At anything that isn't control and calculation. I don't know how to—" She kissed him, hard and certain, hands fisting in his jacket, pulling him closer. This wasn't like the kiss after the fire. That had been desperation and adrenaline. This was choice, deliberate and real and terrifying. Adrian responded like a man starving, his hands in her hair, her back against the wall, everything controlled and measured about him burning away into raw need. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against her mouth. "No." "Lydia, I'm choosing this, choosing you." She looked at him. This man who'd saved her and infuriated her and somehow become essential. "Not because of the contract, not because I have to, because I want to." Something broke in his expression. Whatever wall he'd built around himself crumbled, and what was underneath was raw and vulnerable and real. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rough and surprised. Then he kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no calculation, just heat and want and the feeling of falling into something they couldn't control. The connecting door between their chambers stayed open that night. The next morning, Lydia woke wrapped in Adrian's arms, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Sunlight streamed through windows she'd forgotten to close. The world felt different, softer somehow. "You're awake," Adrian murmured, voice sleep rough. "So are you." "I've been awake for an hour, watching you sleep." "That's creepy." "Probably." His arms tightened. "I don't care." Lydia tilted her head back to look at him. His hair was mussed, face relaxed in a way she'd never seen. He looked younger, almost peaceful. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I made the right choice." He brushed hair back from her face. "Marrying you. I thought it was strategy. Turns out it was the best decision I ever made. Even though I nearly bankrupted you. Even though— You make me better, Lydia. Make me want to be better." He paused. "I love you. I don't know when it happened, but it did." The words landed like a lightning strike. Lydia's breath caught, her heart doing something complicated and painful in her chest. "Adrian, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." "I do, though." The words tumbled out, clumsy but true. "Love you. I think I have for a while. I was just too stubborn to admit it." His smile was sunrise after a long night. "Stubborn is an understatement. I learned from you." "Fair point." They lay there in comfortable silence, the world outside waiting, but for once not urgent. Then a knock shattered the peace. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Blackwood's voice, carefully neutral. "There are visitors from London. They say it's urgent." Adrian sighed. "Can't they wait?" "They say they're from the Royal Treasury, something about the market contracts." Lydia and Adrian exchanged glances. The Royal Treasury didn't make social calls. They dressed quickly, Adrian helping with buttons and laces in a domestic intimacy that felt surreal. By the time they reached the drawing room, 3 severe-looking men in government uniforms waited. Duke Thornvale, the lead official said, bowing slightly. Duchess, forgive the intrusion. We're here regarding the direct market contracts your estate has established. Lydia's stomach dropped. Is there a problem? On the contrary, the Crown is impressed. The official pulled out documents. Your model has increased agricultural revenues across the region by 32%. Other estates are noticing. They want to replicate it. Adrian's expression was carefully blank. And the Crown's interest? We'd like to implement this system nationwide. With your cooperation, of course. The official looked at Lydia. The Queen herself was quite intrigued when she heard about a duchess selling her jewelry to rebuild tenant farms. She's requesting an audience. Lydia felt the world tilt. The Queen wants to meet me? She wants to discuss your methods, how you negotiated the contracts, managed the finances, coordinated reconstruction. The official almost smiled. You've caused quite a stir, Your Grace. Turned estate management into a revolutionary act. I was just trying to keep people from starving. Yes. Well, apparently that's revolutionary enough. The official handed Adrian a sealed letter. Her Majesty's invitation. The palace is expecting you next month. They left as abruptly as they'd arrived, leaving Lydia and Adrian staring at each other in stunned silence. Did that just happen? Lydia asked. I think so. Adrian looked at the royal seal, something like pride flickering in his expression. You're being summoned to court to advise the Queen. That's insane. That's what you've built. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. 6 months ago, you were drowning. Now you're changing the kingdom. We're changing it, together. Together, he agreed. The news spread through the estate like wildfire. The Duchess, who'd nearly bankrupted them, was now advising royalty. Servants who'd doubted her whispered about her with something approaching awe. That evening, a carriage arrived from the northern farms. Thomas Grayson climbed out, looking uncomfortable in clean clothes. Your Grace, he said when Lydia met him at the door, I heard about the palace. Thought you should know. The tenants took a vote. We want you to tell the Queen about us. About what you did here. I will. And he hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. A small carved bird, rough but beautiful. My daughter made this. Before the fire. I thought you should have it. As thanks. Lydia's eyes burned. Grayson, I can't. Please. She'd want you to have it. His voice cracked. You gave us hope when we had none. That's worth more than all the grain contracts in the world. Lydia took the carving with trembling hands. I'll treasure it, I promise. He nodded, turned to leave, then paused. You're not what I expected, Your Grace. None of this is. But I'm glad you came to Thornvale. We all are. After he left, Lydia stood in the entrance hall holding a dead child's toy and crying for the first time since the wedding. Adrian found her there, pulled her against his chest, let her break down without asking questions. I couldn't save her, Lydia sobbed. I tried so hard, but I couldn't. I know, but you saved everyone else. He held her tighter. You can't carry every loss, love. It'll destroy you. Then let it destroy me. Better that than becoming cold. You'll never be cold. He kissed her hair. That's what makes you powerful. You care, even when it hurts. That night, they sat together in Adrian's study, reviewing the contracts one more time before the palace meeting. The carved bird sat on the desk between them, a reminder of what they were fighting for. What if the Queen hates the plan? Lydia asked. Then we'll convince her otherwise. Adrian's hand covered hers. You stood in front of a knife for people who wanted you dead. The Queen is nothing compared to that. The Queen can have me executed. Only if I let her, which I won't. His smile was sharp. You're mine, remember? And I protect what's mine. Even from royalty? Especially from royalty. Lydia laughed despite herself. You're impossible. I'm in love. It's made me reckless. Good. Reckless suits you. The moon rose over Thornvale Estate, silver light spilling through windows that once felt like prison bars. Somewhere in the village, tenants slept in rebuilt homes. Somewhere in London, the Queen waited to hear about a duchess who chose compassion over comfort. And in the study, surrounded by contracts and ledgers and dreams made real, Lydia Thornvale sat beside her husband and understood finally, what it meant to be home. Not the estate, not the title, not the wealth or the power. Just this. Him. The life they'd built from ashes and impossible choices. Ready for tomorrow? Adrian asked. No, but I'll do it anyway. That's my Duchess. He pulled her close, and his kiss tasted like promises kept and futures earned. Let's show them what happens when you give a desperate woman power and don't expect her to use it. Lydia smiled against his mouth. Let's remind them that queens aren't born, they're forged. And in the morning, they would ride to London together, not as a contract or an arrangement or a marriage of convenience, but as partners who'd survived hell and come out stronger. The Iron Duke and his impossible Duchess, ready to change the world. The palace rose from London's morning fog like something from a fever dream, all white stone and gold trim, towers that pierced the sky. Guards in crimson uniforms standing rigid as statues. Lydia's hands twisted in her lap as the carriage rolled through gates that looked designed to keep people out, not welcome them in. Breathe, Adrian said beside her. I am breathing. You're hyperventilating. There's a difference. His hand covered hers, warm and solid. The queen is just a person, Lydia. She eats, sleeps, probably argues with her advisors like everyone else. She's also the most powerful woman in the kingdom and could destroy us with a word. She could try. Adrian's smile was sharp. But we've survived worse. The carriage stopped. A footman in powder-white livery opened the door, bowing so low Lydia worried about his spine. Your Graces, Her Majesty is expecting you in the Rose Chamber. The Rose Chamber turned out to be a room larger than Lydia's entire childhood home, dripping with silk wallpaper and paintings of long-dead royals who looked vaguely disapproving. Queen Charlotte sat at the far end, flanked by advisors who watched Lydia and Adrian approach like hawks eyeing prey. The queen herself was smaller than Lydia expected. Older, too, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every lie ever told. She wore burgundy silk and enough diamonds to fund a small army. Duke Thornvale, the queen said, her voice carrying quiet authority, and the infamous Duchess. How delightful. Lydia curtsied so deep her knees protested. Adrian bowed with the bare minimum respect protocol required. Your Majesty, Lydia said, keeping her voice steady. Thank you for the invitation. Invitation suggests you had a choice. The queen's smile was pleasant and terrifying. I requested your presence because my treasury officials are quite agitated about your little agricultural revolution. They seem to think you've discovered something remarkable. I discovered that people work harder when they're not starving, Your Majesty. Hardly revolutionary. One of the advisors, a thin man with a face like a dried prune, cleared his throat. Your Grace, the issue is more complex than simple charity. You've disrupted established trade networks, undermined merchant guilds, and set a precedent that could destabilize. Lord Hartwell, the Queen interrupted, not looking at him. I didn't ask for your analysis. I asked to hear from the Duchess herself. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me, my dear, why did you do it? The truth, not the pretty version you'd tell at a garden party. Lydia met those sharp eyes and decided honesty was less dangerous than flattery. Because I was drowning 6 months ago, Your Majesty. Drowning in debt and desperation and the knowledge that I'd have to watch my father die in poverty. So when the Duke offered me a way out, I took it. And when I saw other people drowning the same way, I couldn't... She stopped, searching for words. I couldn't look away, even when it would have been smarter to. So you sold your jewelry and rebuilt their farms. Yes, Your Majesty. And negotiated market contracts that tripled their profits. 40% increase, actually, not quite triple. Don't be modest, it's unbecoming. The Queen sat back, studying Lydia like she was a painting that didn't quite make sense. My advisors tell me this model could work across the kingdom. Increase revenues, stabilize rural economies, reduce the risk of peasant uprisings. All very practical benefits. But, Lydia heard the unspoken word, but it requires nobles to care more about their people than their profit margins. To see tenants as assets to invest in rather than resources to extract from. The Queen's expression was unreadable. Most of my peers would rather die than admit a commoner's life has value beyond tax revenue. Then most of your peers are idiots, Your Majesty. The advisors gasped. Adrian's hand tightened on Lydia's elbow in warning. The Queen laughed. Actually laughed, the sound sharp and genuine. Perhaps, but they're idiots with power, which makes them dangerous. She stood, and everyone in the room straightened instinctively. Walk with me, Duchess. Alone. Adrian's jaw tightened. Your Majesty, You don't think what, Duke Thornvale? That I'll harm your wife? The Queen's smile was knife-edged. How refreshingly protective, but unnecessary. I simply want a conversation without your rather formidable presence looming over it. She swept toward a side door. Lydia followed, heart hammering, feeling Adrian's worried gaze on her back. The Queen led her through a series of increasingly private rooms, each more opulent than the last, until they reached a small garden courtyard. Real roses this time, blooming despite the season, their scent almost overwhelming. Do you know why I really summoned you? The Queen asked, trailing fingers over rose petals. To discuss the agricultural reforms? Partly. Mostly I wanted to meet the woman who made the Iron Duke fall in love. She glanced at Lydia, expression softer now. Adrian Thornvale has been emotionally unavailable since his parents died. Built walls so high even I couldn't scale them. Then you appeared, and within 6 months he's selling family heirlooms and defending your honor at society balls. It's remarkable. Lydia didn't know what to say to that. I lost my husband 3 years ago, the Queen continued quietly. We married young, for politics, like everyone in our position, but somewhere along the way we fell in love anyway. When he died, she stopped, composing herself. I understand what it's like to find something real in a world built on transactions. Your Majesty, I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I need to know if you're genuine or just very good at playing games. The Queen turned, eyes boring into Lydia's. Because if I implement your reforms across the kingdom, I'm betting everything on you being sincere. If you're not, if this is just elaborate social climbing, it could destroy the economy and make me look like a fool. It's not a game. Lydia held her ground. I don't have the energy for games, Your Majesty. I barely have energy to survive most days, but I do have the energy to help people who remind me of who I used to be, desperate and alone and 1 bad month from complete ruin. The Queen studied her for a long moment, then nodded, something like approval in her expression. Good, because I'm going to need your help implementing this properly. Not just advice, active involvement. You'll work with my treasury officials, train estate managers, oversee pilot programs in other regions. Lydia's mind reeled. Your Majesty, I'm not qualified. You're the only person who is qualified. You've done what everyone said was impossible. That makes you exactly who I need. The Queen's smile was genuine now. Besides, it'll infuriate half my court, which is always entertaining. They walked back to the rose chamber where Adrian waited, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 20 minutes. His relief when he saw Lydia was palpable. The Duchess has agreed to serve as my agricultural advisor, the Queen announced to the room. Effective immediately. She'll have full authority to review estate contracts and recommend reforms. Anyone who obstructs her work answers to me personally. Lord Hartwell looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Your Majesty, surely a formal review process is exactly what we don't need. Formal reviews take years and accomplish nothing. The Queen sat back in her throne, regal and immovable. The Duchess will have her recommendations ready within 3 months. Make it happen, gentlemen. The ride back to Thornvale was silent for the first mile. Then Adrian let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Agricultural advisor to the Queen, that's insane, Lydia supplied. I was going to say perfect, but insane works too. He pulled her close, kissed her temple. You realize this changes everything. I know. You'll have power now, real power. Every estate in the kingdom will be watching you. I know, Lydia repeated, quieter this time. Are you terrified? Completely. Good. Adrian's arm tightened around her. That means you understand what's at stake. The news spread before they even reached home. By the time their carriage pulled into Thornvale's courtyard, the entire staff was assembled, Mrs. Blackwood at the front with something approaching a smile. Your Grace, the housekeeper said, curtsying with actual respect. Congratulations on your appointment. The Queen chose well. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood, though I suspect I'll need your help more than ever now. You'll have it. We all will. She glanced at the assembled staff. This estate has changed significantly under your guidance. We're proud to serve you. Coming from Mrs. Blackwood, that was practically a declaration of love. The next 3 months were brutal. Lydia divided her time between Thornvale and London, reviewing contracts from estates across the kingdom, meeting with Treasury officials who ranged from supportive to openly hostile, documenting what worked and what needed changing. She discovered that Thornvale's problems weren't unique. Everywhere she looked, exploitative rent structures, merchants taking unfair cuts, tenant farmers drowning in debt, while estate owners lived in luxury. It's worse than I thought, she told Adrian one night, surrounded by documents in his study. Some of these contracts are barely legal. They're designed to keep tenants dependent, to extract every penny while giving nothing back. Can you fix it? I can try, but there's going to be resistance. Lords who profit from the current system won't give up their advantages easily. Then we'll fight them. Adrian looked up from his own work. Together. The resistance came faster than expected. 2 weeks after Lydia's appointment, a coalition of lords petitioned the Queen to revoke it. They claimed she lacked proper authority, that her reforms were radical and dangerous, that she was inappropriately using her position for personal gain. The petition was signed by 43 nobles, including several earls and 1 duke. Look at the third name, Adrian said, showing her the document. Lord Edmund Pemberton. Of course, Edmund had been quietly rebuilding his reputation, and now he was leading the charge against her. The Queen summoned Lydia again, this time to a private audience, just the 2 of them in a study that smelled like old books and ambition. They want me to remove you, the Queen said without preamble. 43 signatures. That's significant political pressure. Lydia's stomach dropped. I understand, Your Majesty. Do you? Because I don't think you do. The Queen leaned forward. They're not fighting your reforms because they think you're wrong. They're fighting because they know you're right. And if your model succeeds, they'll have to admit they've been exploiting their people for generations. So what do I do? You prove them wrong, publicly. The Queen slid a paper across the desk. I'm hosting a summit. Every major estate owner in the kingdom. You'll present your findings, defend your reforms, and convince them to adopt your model voluntarily. And if they refuse? Then I'll make it mandatory, but that creates resentment and resistance. The Queen's eyes were sharp. Better if they choose it themselves, even if we have to back them into a corner first. The summit was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Lydia spent every waking moment preparing, gathering data, organizing arguments, rehearsing responses to every possible objection. Adrian helped, challenging her assumptions, playing devil's advocate, making sure she could defend every position. They'll go for your background, he warned. The fact that you're not noble-born, that you married into this position. They'll try to undermine your credibility. Let them try. They'll bring up Edmund, the scandal, your father's debts. I know. Lydia met his eyes. None of that matters. The numbers matter. The results matter. The fact that tenant revenues increased 40% matters. Everything else is noise. The night before the summit, Lydia couldn't sleep. She stood on their private balcony, watching stars wheel overhead, trying to calm the panic threading through her chest. Adrian found her there, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. What if I fail? She whispered. What if I stand up there and they tear apart every argument? What if the Queen loses faith in me? Then we'll survive it, like we've survived everything else. He pulled her against his chest. But you won't fail, Lydia. You're too stubborn. Stubbornness isn't enough. It's gotten you this far. She turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd become her anchor. I love you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. I know. He kissed her, soft and certain. And I love you. Have since that night you stood between me and an angry mob like you could stop them with willpower alone. That was stupid. That was you. Brave and reckless and impossible. His smile was gentle. Go be that tomorrow. Show them exactly what they're up against. The summit hall was designed for intimidation: soaring ceilings, marble columns, a throne-like chair for the queen at the far end. Rows of seats held every powerful lord in the kingdom, all watching as Lydia took her place at the central podium. Edmund sat in the third row, smirking. "Duchess Thornvale," the queen said from her elevated position. "You may begin." Lydia's hands shook. She gripped the podium to steady them, took a breath, and started. 6 months ago, tenant farmers on the Thornvale estate were starving. Despite working from dawn to dusk, they couldn't afford to feed their families. The rents weren't technically unfair, but the system was broken. So we changed it. She pulled out her first chart, held it up for everyone to see. Direct market access increased grain prices by 62%. Eliminating merchant middlemen put more money directly into tenant hands. Within 3 months, starvation rates dropped to 0. Within 6 months, tenant revenues increased 40%. "You said 40% before," someone called out. "Now it's 62? Which is it?" Grain prices increased 62%. Overall tenant revenues, including livestock and other crops, increased 40%. Lydia kept her voice level. The difference is important. It shows that even modest reforms have cascading benefits. It also shows you don't know how to present data consistently, Lord Hartwell said from his seat beside the Queen. It shows I'm giving you the complete picture instead of cherry-picking convenient numbers. Lydia met his eyes. "Which is more than most reports you receive, I'd wager." A few lords laughed. Hartwell's face darkened. "The point," Lydia continued, "is that investing in tenants benefits everyone. Healthier workers are more productive. Stable families reduce crime. Increased revenues mean higher tax collection. You're advocating for higher taxes?" Edmund stood, voice dripping with false concern. "How progressive." "I'm advocating for realistic projections based on actual productivity instead of extraction-based estimates that assume maximum suffering." Lydia didn't let him rattle her. "But thank you for demonstrating exactly the kind of bad faith interpretation I expected." Edmund's smirk faltered. Lydia spent the next hour walking through her reforms, the contracts, the market access, the financial models. She showed how Thornvale's profits had actually increased despite lower rents, because productive tenants generated more revenue than desperate ones. Then she opened the floor for questions. "Why should we trust someone with no formal training in estate management?" a duke asked from the back. "Because formal training taught you the current system, which is failing." Lydia's voice was calm. "I offer something your education can't, perspective from the other side. I know what desperation looks like. I know how close good people get to violence when their children are hungry. And I know how to prevent it." "You nearly bankrupted Thornvale," another lord pointed out. "Your husband had to sell family heirlooms to fund your schemes." "I did, because I prioritized people over possessions." Lydia looked around the room. "And those heirlooms? They're replaceable. Dead tenants aren't." "This is all very touching," Edmund said, standing again. "But it's also naive. The Duchess here wants us to believe that kindness and compassion can reform centuries of economic structure. But she's ignoring basic reality. Some people are simply meant to serve. That's the natural order." The room went quiet. "Natural order," Lydia repeated softly. "Like the natural order that said women couldn't own property? Or that said children should work in factories? Or that said nobles could beat their servants without consequence?" She stepped out from behind the podium. "Every generation thinks their cruelty is justified by natural order. Then the next generation looks back in horror." "You're comparing estate management to child abuse?" "I'm comparing exploitation to exploitation. The mechanism doesn't matter." Lydia walked closer to Edmund's row. "You're scared, Lord Pemberton. You and everyone who signed that petition. You're scared because if my reforms work, you'll have to admit you've been hurting people unnecessarily for years, that you could have been better and chose not to." Edmund's face went red. "How dare you? No. How dare you?" Lydia's voice rose, carrying through the hall. "You destroyed my reputation because I was inconvenient. You called me damaged goods. You humiliated me in front of 300 people because your ego was more important than basic decency." She stopped directly in front of him. "And now you're trying to destroy reforms that would help thousands of families because your profit margin might drop 5%. So don't talk to me about natural order. Talk to me about greed. Edmund opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Duchess Thornvale, the Queen's voice cut through the tension. That's quite enough. Lydia turned, expecting to be reprimanded. The Queen was smiling. Though I must say, Lord Pemberton, she makes an excellent point. Your petition claims her reforms are impractical, yet the data suggests otherwise. The Queen stood, and everyone in the room straightened. I'm implementing the Thornvale model as official Crown policy. All estate contracts will be reviewed within 6 months. Those found to be exploitative will be restructured. The Duchess will oversee the process personally. The room exploded. Protests, arguments, a few lords standing so fast their chairs toppled. Your Majesty, you can't possibly. I can, and I will. The Queen's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. This kingdom's strength comes from its people, not from how efficiently we can extract their labor. If you can't understand that, perhaps you shouldn't be managing estates at all. She swept from the room, advisors scrambling to follow. The summit dissolved into angry clusters of nobles arguing among themselves. Lydia stood in the center of it all, shaking, trying to process what just happened. Adrian appeared at her elbow. We should go before someone challenges you to a duel. Can they do that? Technically, no. Practically, let's not find out. They made it to the carriage before the tears came. Lydia collapsed against Adrian, half laughing, half crying, completely overwhelmed. I can't believe that worked. I can. Adrian held her tight. You were magnificent, terrifying, but magnificent. I called Edmund greedy in front of the entire nobility. You called him worse than greedy. You called him cruel. Adrian's smile was fierce. He deserved every word. The ride home felt different than the ride to London had. Lighter, somehow, despite the enormity of what came next. This is going to be hard, Lydia said quietly. The implementation, the resistance, lords who will fight every change. Yes? And I'll have enemies now, real ones, people with power who want me to fail. Yes? So why do I feel like I just won? Adrian tilted her face up, kissed her softly. Because you did. You fought the entire nobility and won. Everything else is just cleanup. The months that followed were exactly as hard as Lydia predicted. She traveled to estates across the kingdom, reviewed contracts that made her sick, argued with lords who saw their tenants as livestock. Some resisted, some adapted. A few embraced the changes wholeheartedly. But slowly, steadily, the kingdom changed. Tenant revenues increased, crime rates dropped, tax collection improved. The economic benefits became undeniable, even to the most resistant nobles. And through it all, Adrian was beside her, not leading, not controlling, just supporting. Offering advice when she asked, stepping back when she didn't, loving her through every victory and defeat. 2 years after the summit, Lydia stood in the rebuilt northern farms, watching children play in streets that had once been ash. Thomas Grayson's new house stood at the corner, solid and warm, smoke rising from its chimney. He found her there, looking older but healthier. Your Grace, heard you were visiting. Just checking on things. Things are good, better than good. He gestured at the village around them. We're actually thriving, not just surviving, thriving, because of you. Because of all of us. No. Grayson's voice was firm. Because you cared when caring wasn't convenient, because you fought when fighting was dangerous, because you were one of us once and didn't forget what that meant. Lydia's throat was tight. Your daughter would be proud. We all are. He pulled something from his pocket, a small wooden bird beautifully carved. My son made this. He's learning the craft. Says when he's good enough, he'll make them to sell in the city markets you opened up. He pressed it into her hand. Keep it. Reminder that good things can come from terrible ones. Back at Thornvale that evening, Lydia found Adrian in their chambers reading by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, smiled that soft smile he saved only for her. How were the farms? Thriving, she showed him the bird. Grayson's son is taking up wood carving. That's good. Shows stability. Adrian set down his book, pulled her into his lap. You're changing lives, Lydia. One estate at a time. We're changing lives. No, this is you. He brushed hair back from her face. I provided resources. You provided the courage. They sat in comfortable silence, watching firelight dance across the walls of a room that had once felt like a cage and now felt like home. Do you ever regret it? Lydia asked quietly. Marrying me? The chaos I brought into your controlled life? Every day, Adrian said, completely serious. Lydia's heart clenched. I regret not finding you sooner, not having more years with you, not knowing that life could be this good. He cupped her face in both hands. But marrying you? That's the one thing I'll never regret. 5 years after their wedding, Lydia stood in the palace gardens again. The queen had summoned her for what she called a small celebration, which in royal terms meant half the court was there. Duchess Thornvale, the queen said, voice carrying across the assembled crowd. 5 years ago, I took a risk on a woman with no formal training, no political connections, and a scandal-filled past. My advisors thought I was mad. Scattered laughter from the crowd. But that woman transformed our kingdom's agricultural system, increased overall productivity by 38%, reduced rural poverty by half, and proved that compassion and profit aren't mutually exclusive. The queen stepped forward, holding a small velvet box. For exceptional service to the crown and the people of this realm, I'm bestowing upon you the Order of the Golden Rose, the highest civilian honor the kingdom can grant. The crowd applauded as the queen pinned the medal to Lydia's dress. It was heavy, warm, real. Thank you, Your Majesty, Lydia managed, throat tight. Thank you, Duchess, for showing us all what leadership actually looks like. Adrian was waiting when the ceremony ended, pride written across his face. Order of the Golden Rose, he said, touching the medal gently. Only 15 people in history have received it. I know, it's overwhelming. It's deserved. He pulled her close. Come on, let's go home. Home. Thornvale Estate, where staff greeted them like family, where tenant farmers stopped by to share harvests and stories, where Lydia's father lived in comfortable rooms, his health restored, able to see his daughter become something he'd never imagined. That night, Lydia found her father in his sitting room, looking at the medal she'd shown him earlier. I'm proud of you, he said, the words still slurred but clear enough. So proud. I know, Papa. Your mother, he paused, gathering strength, would be too. Lydia kissed his forehead, tears threatening. I hope so. Later, in the Duchess's chambers that were truly hers now, Lydia stood at the window watching moonlight silver the estate grounds. Adrian came up behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. What are you thinking? He asked. That 6 years ago I was drowning, desperate enough to marry a stranger just to survive. She leaned back against his chest. And now I'm here. Alive. Respected. Loved. Sounds like a happy ending. Sounds like a beginning. Lydia turned in his arms. There's still so much to do. So many estates that need reform. So many people who need help. Always working. But Adrian's smile was fond. Can't you rest for one night? I could. But where's the fun in that? He laughed, kissed her, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this. His arms around her, his heart beating against hers, the warmth of being exactly where she belonged. The years that followed brought children, 2 boys and a girl, all loud and wild and completely loved. The estate that had once felt cold and rigid filled with laughter, with running feet, with life. Lydia taught them what she'd learned, that kindness wasn't weakness, that power meant responsibility, that the measure of a person was what they did when no one was watching. Adrian taught them strategy, discipline, how to protect what mattered without becoming hard. Together they raised children who understood privilege meant service, not superiority. On their 10th anniversary, Adrian found Lydia in the library where they'd spent so many late nights planning reforms. She was reviewing proposals from a new generation of estate managers, young people inspired by her work who wanted to continue it. Still changing the world? He asked. Trying to. She set down her papers. Though it's harder now. The easy reforms are done. What's left requires deeper change. So you'll keep fighting. Of course. She smiled. It's what I do. Adrian pulled her up into his arms, swaying gently despite the lack of music. Do you remember our wedding? How cold it was? How terrified you looked? I was marrying a stranger to save my father. Terror was appropriate. And now? Now I'm married to my best friend. Terror is optional. Lydia rested her head on his shoulder. Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself. I just provided the opportunity. Then thank you for that. For seeing something in me when everyone else saw ruin. I saw strength. I was right. They danced in the empty library, holding each other close, while outside the estate hummed with life they'd built together. Tenants working land they could finally profit from. Staff who chose to stay because they were valued. Children growing up in a world slightly better than the one their parents had inherited. 20 years after that desperate wedding, Lydia Thornvale stood in the same church where she'd married a stranger. But this time, she wasn't alone, wasn't scared, wasn't selling herself for survival. This time, she was christening her grandchildren, her daughter's twins, born healthy and loud and perfect. Adrian stood beside her, silver threading through his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from years of smiling. He looked at her the way he had that night after the fire, like she was something precious and dangerous and completely his. Grandmother suits you, he murmured. Old man suits you. We're both old now. We're both alive. Lydia squeezed his hand. That's enough. After the ceremony, family and friends gathered at Thornvale for celebration. Thomas Grayson's grandchildren played with Lydia's grandchildren in gardens that had once felt like prison walls. The thin woman who'd challenged Lydia at that first confrontation now managed one of the most successful estates in the region, following the model Lydia had pioneered. Edmund Pemberton wasn't there. He'd lost his estate 3 years ago to gambling debts, died alone and bitter. Lydia felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction, not pity, just the distant sadness of a life wasted on cruelty. Lady Ashford had sent a gift, a grudging acknowledgement of Lydia's position. It was something. As evening fell and guests departed, Lydia and Adrian walked through the estate grounds alone. The same path they'd walked 1,000 times, now worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Any regrets? Lydia asked. None. Adrian's answer was immediate. You? Just one. He stopped, concerned. What? That I can't go back and tell that desperate girl in the burned dress at Lady Ashford's ball what was coming. That the worst night of her life was actually the beginning of everything good. Lydia smiled. But I suppose that's not how it works. No, we only understand in hindsight. They stood on the hill overlooking the estate, the house, the farms, the village beyond. Lights glowed in windows, smoke rose from chimneys, life everywhere, abundant and real. We did this, Lydia said softly. Built something that matters. You did this. I just had the good sense to choose you. We chose each other. She leaned against him, his arm automatic around her shoulders. Eventually. The stars came out, the same stars that had watched her stand on a terrace 6 years ago, choosing between ruin and survival. Choosing a man she didn't know, a future she couldn't predict, a life that seemed impossible. She'd survived it, more than survived. She'd conquered it. The desperate girl who'd sold herself for her father's life had become the woman who changed a kingdom. The marriage built on contracts and cold calculation had become the greatest love story she'd never known she wanted. And standing here now, surrounded by everything they'd built, everyone they'd saved, Lydia understood something fundamental. The fall that broke her world hadn't destroyed her. It had remade her into exactly who she needed to be. Ready to go inside? Adrian asked. Lydia looked at the estate one more time, her home, her legacy, her kingdom reclaimed from ashes and impossible choices. Yes, she said. Let's go home. And hand in hand, the Iron Duke and his impossible Duchess walked back into the warmth and light and laughter they'd spent a lifetime building. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and hard-won and completely, fiercely theirs. In the distance, children's laughter echoed through halls that once knew only silence. And somewhere in the village, a tenant farmer told his daughter the story of the Duchess, who cared enough to fight. The legacy lived on. The story was complete. But the work, the beautiful, brutal work of building something better that would never truly end. And Lydia wouldn't have it any other way.